If there's one thing I truly enjoy doing in my channel, is to discuss gaming in Italy, more specifically what games depict and what games are developed in the beautiful old country. The Italian gaming industry is far from being among the biggest, but it is emerging, and as a proud Italian gentlefox, I wanna help out as much as possible by giving some exposure to the international English-speaking world of the internet. In past videos, I reviewed Italian-made games, such as Super Cane Magic Zero, Rough Trigger, Gioventù Ribelle, and most recently Lawgivers 2, and those are far from the only Italian-made games I've played. In fact, there are 5 small indie titles that I wanted to discuss on the channel, but making a video for each would be a bit exhaustive. The 5 games I'm talking about are Wheels of Aurelia, Easy Red 2, 100 Days Winemaking Simulator, Bud Spencer and Terence Hill Slapping Beans 2, and Lawgivers Lone Wolf Remastered. So, for today's video, I've decided to combine 5 smaller reviews into one single compilation. All these games were developed by fairly small studios in the peninsula, and they are all different from each other, from narrative adventures to simulators to RPGs. But enough of the presentazioni, and let us start with the first game. Roll the intro. Wheels of Aurelia is the first game I want to talk about, since it is the title that gives the biggest Italian vibes out of the 5. The title was developed in 2016 by Santa Ragione Game Studio in Milan, a team of around 10 people, and it was released both on iOS and PC. The title is a visual novel, combined with driving gameplay. The game is set in 1978, and, as you might have guessed by the title, the premise of the game is to drive across the famous Via Aurelia, a road that goes from Rome to northern Italy via Tuscany. You play as Lella and are traveling with her friend Olga, among other hitchhikers you can decide to pick up along the way. The driving itself is not the focus of the game. The gameplay mechanics are quite simple but work well. What is more important in Wheels of Aurelia is the narrative, being the core of the whole adventure. While driving, there are many conversations to be had, with every reply having different dialogue options and thus different outcomes. In fact, the game has a whopping 16 endings, depending on the decisions you take along the journey. A single playthrough may last from 15 to 20 minutes, but no playthrough is alike. Even the exits you can take on the road can lead to different cities and thus different events. The different people you can talk to have their own stories and insights in the world to share, immersing the player right in those culturally rich years that were the 70s for Italy. The artistic direction and the graphics also work well with the narrative, and it is a very charming game to look at while playing. Having said that, no playthroughs alike might be a bit generous. Many endings do have overlapping situations, so in 2 hours you have seen probably 90% of what the game has to offer. In 3, you virtually complete them all. In theory, this is not a huge problem. However, since the individual playthroughs are brief, there's not enough time to truly develop characters and the main story, so there is less of an incentive in playing the same run and taking a slightly different decision just to see 2 different slides in the epilogue. Every ending feels a bit rushed, devastating for a narrative-based game. But despite this big shortcoming, I did enjoy the concept of the game. I was quite immersed in 70s Italy, a time period that was filled with cultural revolutions and key historical events. The dialogues and the handy encyclopedia do teach about my country's culture in an interactive and natural way no documentary can emulate, not to mention the nice sceneries. The execution of the project could have been different, but I still had a good time playing the game from start to finish. For its full retail price, I think Wheels of Aurelia is a bit overpriced, but the game is constantly on sales, and for €2 I think it's more than worth it to give the title a shot. It is a short but quite a unique Italian experience, made by Italians as a love letter to the chaotic but magical decade. I truly hope, despite its flaws, such a letter can be enjoyed by everybody. From the 70s to the 40s, we move to Easy Red 2, a Second World War game developed by Corvo Studio, gaming company from Faenza made up by... only one guy? Huh, quite impressive. Marco Amadei is the main and believed sole creator of the title. As you can probably tell by the gameplay in the background, Easy Red 2 is a multiplayer first-person shooter set in Europe, Africa and the Pacific Front. The game can be played in single player and even in co-op, but the various maps are structured as multiplayer attack and defense matches. What is interesting to notice is that maps within the same campaign are interconnected. If you fly across the sky during a specific battle, you can observe at a distance the previous and the next match's battlegrounds, giving a feeling of a true campaign evolving with time. The maps vary greatly, from countryside to cities to deserts to seasides. There are many well-made maps, with some being quite impressive with the quality and quantity of elements making the map, a crucial element for this genre of games. They give the vibe of those early Battlefield games for the PS3, but a bit more modern, impressive considering Easy Red 2 is developed by one man. The campaigns within the game are many, but some are separately sold DLCs. There's the usual North African campaign, Stalingrad, Normandy, and of course being an Italian-made video game, the Battle of Anzio. The sole campaign of the game that cannot be found in other similar World War II games is the Battle of Kos, a Greek island where Italians fought the Germans after the armistice was signed. And hey, did I mention flying earlier? Well yes, the game offers the chance to fly and drive a great variety of vehicles, both alone and with friends. There's all sorts of tanks and aeroplanes, and they all play differently. The weapon selections is vast too, with many nations introducing their arsenals to the game. The title is honestly quite more complex than I originally envisioned when I first put it up, and I fear that this short review does not do the game's mode of content justice. Note that Easy Red does not aim to be a realistic war simulator like Arma, but I think it strikes a good balance between casual and more professional, especially when it comes to the vehicles. The sole problem Easy Red 2 does have is the poor enemy AI. The enemy tanks and planes give up a good fight, but land soldiers are not the brightest men in the army, and more often than not they stay in place in plain sight. Also, Easy Red 2 is not the most original World War II multiplayer game out there. Don't get me wrong, the game works fine, it's fun to play, nice maps and all, but if you already play similar titles, you might get a sense of déjà vu. In short, it does not feel very original, despite its quality. But nevertheless, for the low price of 9 euros, this is definitely a game worth playing if you like the genre. The gameplay is solid and I had a blast playing with my good old friend Dandots, who gifted me Easy Red back in November and with whom I've played the game with the most. Before I forget, the two upcoming games on the list were also gifted me during the last Games in Italy Steam sales, by who else but Dandots were. Grazie Dandots, sei il migliore. These sales are recurring and are definitely useful to find Italian games for a good price. The third game I'd like to discuss today is 100 Days Winemaking Simulator, a game developed by Broken Arm Games in the small Piedmontese city of Acqui. 100 Days is a business simulator, those sort of games where you have to manage and grow your enterprise, in this case an inherited vineyard in Piedmont, northern Italy. To make a profit therefore, the player has to produce wine, a luxury product that, though beloved by all, is challenging and expensive to produce. Now, even if I come from central Italy and I do enjoy a good red, I must confess that before playing this game I was quite ignorant on how wine is actually produced. I had a vague idea, but I was clueless about the details. Luckily for me, the game assumed correctly that not many players around the world know how to produce wine, so the developers implemented a complete and well-structured tutorial that makes the game very accessible. In short, every grape type can help with either a red or a white wine, and for each you want to achieve certain qualities. The main characteristics for a wine are its acidity, sweetness, tannin, body and typicity, with some other additional factors such as taste, soil characteristics and bottling. A grape like the Barbera requires high acidity, while a Chardonnay might instead need less tannin, and so on. Of course, the challenge of the game is found in each step of the preparation of the wine. Every step from pruning to harvest to pressing to bottling changes more than a variable at the same time, and finding a good balance that works for every specific wine is no small feat. And mind you that this is still a business simulator, so you do need to manage the budget. You could decide to increase the wine production, but less rated wine will sell for less. You could also sell your bottles only to private customers, but you don't have unlimited storage, so you might need to sell the restaurants and grocery shop that buy in bulks but for less in order to cash out your year's production. You get the gist of the game. 100 Days is a very respectful business manager title. The gameplay is engaging, and I feel the experience is balanced and very unique, since wine as a product cannot be mass-produced and break the game so easily. The craftsmanship in winemaking is depicted sublimely, and sparked a passion in me to learn more about the topic. Other positive notes of the game are its narrative and the aesthetics. The main storyline of 100 Days is charming and functional, since the protagonist Emma also knows near nothing about winemaking, and you as a player learn with her. The plot is nothing extraordinary, but I found it as a nice addition, insightful and relaxing. The graphics are also splendid, with a clear direction that gives out the Italian countryside vibe, similar to Wheels of Aurelia. Every item in the game is both well designed as well as distinctive, being this again quite functional to the overall gaming experience. The sole drawback the game has is its repetitiveness. The gameplay loop is by design repetitive, and while there's a good progression in place, with even a skill tree and all, you can only make wine one way. Despite that, 100 Days is a relaxing experience that can be played for hours upon hours without end. If you enjoy this type of video games, this Italian entry in my opinion is worth checking out. It takes a bit to learn, but it is definitely worth it. The second to last game developed in Italy we're taking a closer look at today is Bud Spencer and Terence Hill's Lap and Beans 2, developed by Trinity Team, headquartered in Bologna. I'm not sure how much Bud Spencer and Terence Hill are known outside Italy, but they were very famous actors in the peninsula for various action and spaghetti and western films. Amongst many, I think the most known are They Call Me Trinity, Watch Out We're Mad, and Double Trouble. Point being that the two Italian actors were quite the comedic duo, and two Kickstarters were made to make beat-em-up games based on their wacky adventures. The arcade-looking game feels and plays like a classic cabinet entry, similar to Double Dragon for the Sega Mega Drive. You can play as either Bud or Terence, with both playing similar but not identical to each other. Bud is a bit more bulky but is strong as a tank, while Terence is more agile but slightly weaker. The game plays exactly as you see on screen. I don't think I need to explain in depth how an arcade works. The game is a pure beat 'em up, reaching many different looking locations and enemies on screen. But apart from the punches, the title does have occasional minigames, with each playing quite differently from each other. Nothing to write home about, but welcome additions to change the pace of the game from chapter to chapter. The game's plot premise is absurd and chaotic just like the movies, an enjoyable callback for all the fans of the duo. The game only lasts 3 hours, so I have to be careful what to spoil. To keep it vague, let's just say you'll need to slap a lot of people to reach your goals. The game can be played in English with Italian audio, enhancing the immersion. And speaking of immersion, the pixel graphics of the game are a very nice retro touch. Not only is everything in the game splendidly drawn in pixel art, filled with details and life, animations included, but such direction suits the adventure best, since the game does take place in the 80s. Making pixel art is harder than what people may realize, and I'm truly impressed by the high quality Trinity team reached. Apart from some minor issues such as the small enemy variety and some unnecessary puzzles, I think some of you may not be drawn to the game's humor. Don't get me wrong, the writing is not bad, but it is a specific type of humor that is heavily linked to that filmography, one that does not appeal to all. It is hard to explain, but I'll just say that if you do not enjoy Bud Spencer and Terence Hill movies, you would find Slappin' Beans to be an average beat 'em up with little appeal. Also, I think €20 is a little bit overpriced. True, it's heavily replayable, but I suggest you to wait for some Steam sales before buying it. Having said that, I think there's no Italian gamer that would not enjoy Slappin' Beans too. The developers were able to make a Bud Spencer and Terence Hill video game that checks all the boxes. If you enjoy beat 'em ups, you'll like this game, and if you enjoy the movies, you'll definitely love it. Last but not least, we have Lawgivers Lone Wolf, a video game based on Diver's gamebook with the same name. The original title for smartphones was developed by Atlantica Lab, based in Milan, but the remastered version for the PC that I played was made by Reply Game Studios, also located in Milano. Out of the games I've discussed today, Lone Wolf is definitely the odd one out, since it's not only a fantasy role-playing game, similar in tone to The Witcher or the original Dragon Age, but as you can see by yourself, it is a book. Yes, that's right, the narrative aspect of the title is quite literally a written narration, filled with text and images. Of course, this is not just a fancy PDF, but rather a gamebook where the gameplay can be found both in the choices to be made in the story, as well as the battles themselves, including the preparation and the character build. Think of Lawgivers Lone Wolf like a single-player D&D, much more simplified and shorter, but similar in form. Just before starting the adventure, the player can shape the character's skills and abilities. Apart from deciding whether to increase strength, agility or intelligence, the player can decide what superpowers to have at the start of the adventure, also known as Kai. Powers such as talking to animals, healing, telekinesis, survival instincts, camouflage and so on. During the adventure, many are the choices to take, often linked to the acquired skills. The narration is linear, it is a book after all, but the different ways to tackle the same challenge can lead to different outcomes. There are some key diverging narratives when making certain decisions, you can even get a game over if you are reckless. And speaking of choices, the turn-based battles in this game require strategy and careful thought. Taking the wrong choice during a duel can and will lead to a game over. Many are the critical aspects to consider and balance, from mana to limited supplies, not to mention the good and bad luck when rolling the dice. There is a bit of an awkward mouse input the player has to make when attacking, one that clearly derives from the original mobile game, but to be fair, it is very easy to get used to. The challenge of the game relies on the strategy and the quick thinking during the battle, rather than the clicking you see on screen. In fact, this niche game is more complex than what it looks. I bought this title on sale for the low price of €1.49, expecting a short and balanced experience, yet I found myself a very well made title, one that I would have happily paid full price, $15. The narration is very well written, and I'm not a huge fan of fantasy medieval media. There's just something intriguing in the way Joe describes adventure, cryptic but easy to follow, with lore but without never-ending explanations, with few but very well-rounded characters. The gameplay is also solid, with every fight increasing the difficulty without overwhelming the player. There's more strategy than what the footage suggests, and there were some fights I truly needed to prepare for in order to succeed. Perhaps the sole critic I have is that the enemies are few, and there could have been a greater variety of arsenals and spells. Despite this, Lawgivers Lone Wolf is hands down my favorite game out of the 5 on today's list, truly a hidden gem. I'm very happy an Italian team worked on this game, despite the fact that this is the quote-unquote least Italian game out of them all. Before you Google it, Joe is British. This title is a very respectable role-playing game, atypical for sure, but I would consider it as a solid AA experience that deserves more credit than what it got. I was skeptical in the first hours of gameplay, but by the time I reached the end after 15 plus hours, I will give this game my seal of approval without a second thought. So there you have them, 5 games made in Italy you should check out. The quality of every title is different, but they all bring their unique experiences for you to enjoy. I had a lovely time playing them all, and I'm more than proud to promote the Italian gaming industry to my modest but lovely public. What game inspired you the most? There are 5 different genres between these games, so there must be something that suits you best. To all video game developers back in Italy, grazie mille for making these games. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many Italy's times for watching today's video. It is always a pleasure to promote the Italian gaming industry, especially to an international audience. The industry is small, true, but as you saw in this video, there are some awesome games made in Italy, and I hope you give them a try. I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci!